very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Surely you've heard the story of the man who gets a phone call from his doctor, and the doctor says, "Sit down because I have bad news and I have worse news." And the man says, "I'm just sitting." And the doctor says, "The test results are back and you have 24 hours to live." And the man says, "That's the bad news? What could possibly be worse than that?" And the doctor says, "I've been trying to call you since yesterday." So I too have bad news and worse news. The bad news is you have to sit and listen to me for 20 minutes, or 1919 to be specific. The even worse news is it is a Jewish 20 minutes. We could be here all day. They are now passing out survival kits in the galleys if you want to pick one up. My friends, I had a canned speech in my brain that I have now shelved in light of Professor Richard Dawkins' comments. He had to catch a plane, so he's not even going to hear my comments, but no doubt you will relate them to him for me. Professor Dawkins and I had a series of debates on religion and evolution, God and evolution at the University of Oxford when I was the rabbi there from 1988 to 1999. He has since become the world's most famous atheist. Million-copy bestseller. God, so there is a God after all. Look at that. I'm in the wrong profession. And I wanted to say to Richard Dawkins, I mean, one of the great refutations of everything he said is that can a random series of evolutionary accidents create someone as smart as Richard Dawkins? And I would have patronized him and refuted him simultaneously. Because how can you argue with that? No, actually, it could have happened. This is my question. Richard Dawkins said 3 or 4 things, and I'll chart them in the order that he said them. The first was that he has a problem with religion because it's not true. He doesn't care how much benefit it brings to society, because if it's a lie, then why live a lie? Fair enough. But why does he have such a problem with religion? How many other lies does he live that don't bother him at all, even though they seem at times to have a social function? Let me give you an example. He lives in a country called England. And this country is part of the British Commonwealth. And on the dollar bills that are in your pockets, there's a picture of the Queen. Is it true that some people are born royal and some are born only ordinary? Does anyone here want to raise their hand and say, I believe that some are born much more special than others? Is it true that you should live in a castle or in a palace that you haven't worked for? Anyone want to raise their hand for that? Or don't we live in an egalitarian society that utterly refutes the entire belief in a royal family? But he hasn't attacked the royal family, even though it's not true. It's a tradition. But that tradition doesn't bother him. What about family? What about marriage? Richard Dawkins is married, I believe. I certainly knew his wife when I was at Oxford. He and I were friends, actually, and he's actually a very fine man. I wish he were here so I could tell him that. He was always extremely humble and courteous, especially given his fame and renown. And he's a true intellectual. He's never allowed himself to become trite or superficial. Even his arguments today were extremely well presented. But is marriage a true institution? Doesn't evolution say that male nature is to seek the widest possible distribution of the gene pool? Monogamy is a lie. And there's a lot of men who think that monogamy is a type of wood. It's not natural to be monogamous. Don't believe me? Look at the guy to your right. Hopefully he's not your husband. God help me. We know that marriage today doesn't even work. There's a 50% divorce rate in North America. When I was at Oxford, there was a guy who was buried outside of the university. He and his wife were in a plot outside the university. In 1787, his name was Samuel Dryden, and he actually put on his wife's tombstone, "Here lies my wife, here let her lie. Now she's at peace, and so am I." Married women are on average, this is statistically accurate, 25% heavier, 25% more body mass, Then single women. They're seemingly not as happy. And the reason? Because the single woman comes home, checks what's in the fridge, and then she goes to bed. But the married woman comes home, and she checks what's in the bed. I won't even finish that. In fact, if the whole purpose of evolution is merely the propagation of a species because life has no higher purpose or meaning, then why do we even have sex anymore? Because we can artificially inseminate people, and the answer is we don't have sex anymore. Why do we still believe in that? Do you know what the national averages are in the United States for sexual frequency between husband and wife in a marriage? Anyone want to venture a guess? How often do people have sex? Twice a week? Yeah, if they're on a Viagra drip, maybe, yeah. And the national average is once a week. Sounds like a lot, 52 times a week. That's a year, that's not bad. Until you read on, that once a week lasts for 7.5 minutes at a time. That includes all the time he spends begging. And by the way, the last time I speak in Canada often, thank God, I love Canadians, even though I'm an American. It happens. He's got a chuckle out of that. And the last time I was here and I told these Canadian men that the average American husband has sex with his wife once a week, and they looked at me and said, once a week? My God, who are these American men? Superman? They're all nymphomaniacs, oh my God. So why do we still believe in sex? In fact, and I wish Richard were here so he could respond, I recall very distinctly that he said in one of our debates at Oxford that he doesn't really believe in love, and most evolutionary biologists don't either. Look, God can't be seen, felt, touched, heard. Neither can love. No one has ever seen love. You've only ever experienced it. And even that, an evolutionary biologist will tell you is delusional. Love is a trick played on the mind in order to ensure that you have sex and propagate the species. Thank God the delusion has now been dealt away with. We can have sex well without it. Oh yeah! And yet Richard Dawkins never attacked the institution of marriage, even though it doesn't seem to be very true. By the way, one final point on this, because it's important. To show you how far apart the sexes have traveled, I'm going to conduct a very short experiment. This is a question to the women and the women only. Raise your hand, and listen carefully, because it's a precise question. Raise your hand if you need a man. Now, before you do so, I'm not asking you to raise your hand if you can stomach a man. Less so am I asking you to raise your hand if you can survive a man. The question is, raise your hand if you need a man. 1, 1.5, because there's someone raising their hand like this. I mean, the way some of these hands are going up, you'd think I'd say, I asked, raise your hand if you have a venereal disease. Rabbi Shmuley, I have this disease. It's called a man, and I don't know how I got it. And I don't know how to get rid of it. Now, to all the women, we had one hand that went up. Raise your hand to the women again if you need a refrigerator. And why is that? Because GE brings good things to life, right? By the way, I'd like to be fair and ask the men if they need a woman, but when you ask a man a question, raise your hand if you need a woman, what he hears is, raise your hand if you want sex right now. And the question does not work. But Richard Dawkins didn't attack marriage, sex, human relationships, the family either, even though it's not true. Our nature doesn't seem to be programmed for monogamy, and it doesn't work anymore. It's only religion that bothers him, which is curious. I wonder why. I've always wondered that in all of our debates. In this book that I published when I was a rabbi at Oxford, there's a lot of material. And I was reading it, I was sitting here to remind me of the debates that we once had, because I'd like to debate them again, God willing. You see, So that was the first point he made. And the second point he made was, well, God is not real and he's a delusion and evolution is. And yet he himself knows that it's still the theory of evolution. Scientists have not yet called it the fact of evolution. And there's many reasons for that. Richard Dawkins had a debate with another man he mentioned today, Stephen Jay Gould. In England, I remember the debate. Thousands of people came. It was a debate on the theory itself. Stephen Jay Gould totally disagreed with Dawkins' conception of evolution. He believes in gradual change. And a lot of evolutionists today, of the stature of Stephen Jay Gould, world's most famous paleontologist before he passed away, believe in punctuated equilibrium. There is no, because we have no intermediate stages. We have all the missing links. They've dug up the whole world. The fossil record is so vastly incomplete. We also know that genetic mutation, the possibility of a beneficial mutation calculated by some of the greatest geneticists like Muller, who won a Nobel Prize, that genetic mutation has to be, for it to be beneficial, it's less than, 99.9% are all destructive. It's not pleasant to have like a third arm, for example, and it's difficult to assimilate that into a normal life. And yet he believes in evolution, and that's his prerogative. That's okay. And why? Because given enough time, anything can happen, correct? Isn't that what he said? He said that all of these principles that would say that such incredible complexity cannot come from randomness become possible with time. How much time? Well, it used to be 4 billion years. Then it went to 10 billion. Now we're at 14 billion. No doubt by the time my kids grow up, we will now say that the universe is 30 billion years old. Richard Dawkins believes in time, period. Given enough time, anything can happen. The human mind can evolve, the eye can evolve. It's just a question of semantics. I believe in an infinitely powerful God. He believes in infinitely powerful time. It's the same thing. We just call it by a different name. It is still a belief system. My friends, do you know why Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens, who I also debated on evolution and religion at the 92nd Street Y in Manhattan, do you know why they have such a problem with religion? They think that religion is all about creation. The story of creation takes 2 to 3 chapters in the book of Genesis. That's it. The central message of religion is something completely different. The central message of religion is that human beings have choice, that they can exercise moral virtue in this world, that they are not programmed by instinct or genetic predetermination, that they can choose to transcend their nature and be monogamous and be loving and make your wife feel like she's a queen rather than leave her the way 1 in 3 American women are left today on an antidepressant, on one of the miracle drugs of our generation, Prozac, Zoloft, Paxil. That a man can choose to not have his head become a roving radar tower every time he goes out to dinner with his wife and actually talk to her, focus on her, and when he makes love to her, think about her. We are capable of those decisions. It's called conscience, and no animal has it. And it could never evolve because it's not something genetic. There is no creature on the face of the earth, no matter how complex. They can tell us all they want. As Richard Dawkins says in his new book, he says, we are not like primates. We are primates. But we can hold our existence in the palm of our hand and examine it as if we were an outside third party and determine to change our ways and make them better. My God, if that isn't an infinite power. We have the capacity to be angels or to be animals. Isn't that everything you've heard in this religious discussion up until now? That religion is the cause of all the pain in the world? Look, I could fight back if we were in a debate, and I'd say that atheism is the cause of most of the world's pain. The fact is that aggressive Marxist, totalitarian, atheistic ideologies in the 20th century have killed orders of magnitude more people than all the religions in the world combined. God almighty. I mean, Hitler, who hated religion. Read Martin Bormann's Table Talk. All he did, Hitler was a very lazy man. It's amazing he was able to kill so many people when he was so lazy. And he sat there every day with Martin Bormann and his cronies, and Albert Speer discusses it as well, and they talk for hours. He would just attack religion. He hated Christianity. He bought into the Nietzschean idea that the greatest joke ever played by the Jews on the world is called the Christian, the person who believes in forgiveness, the Teutonic knight who was turned into some wimpy weakling who walks around preaching love. Hitler hated religion. He killed 12 million, besides the 60 million who died in the war. He gassed 12 million. 6 million Jews, 90% of the world's gypsies, gays, blacks. Mao, Cultural Revolution and before, the Great Leap Forward, he killed, we don't even know, 40 million, 50 million. He hated religion. Stalin was trained to be a priest. Boy, did he hate religion. He killed at least 40 or 50 million. The great British historian, Paul Johnson, estimates that in the name of communist, totalitarian, atheistic ideologies, 100 million non-combatants were killed in the 20th century alone. My God, that makes auto de fe's and the Spanish Inquisitions and the Crusades pale into insignificance. We're talking a few 100,000 people, perhaps, throughout the past 2 millennia. So I could fight back and say it's the atheists who really have killed, but what's the point? It's not atheists who did it, and it wasn't religious people who did it. It was people who exercised terrible choice because they had no values. You could wear a yarmulke and you can have a beard, and you can be a Muslim. And you heard the beautiful words of my Islamic sister Ingrid, who spoke so eloquently. And you can kill in the name of God. Not only are you not being religious, that's too convenient. Oh, whenever they're acting irreligious, so we just say they're not religious. But they have abrogated the central message of religion, which is, do not kill. You can be a religious person that believes that blacks are the inferior of whites, and that blacks are the children of Ham, who was cursed by Noah. Evolutionists, many evolutionists like Thomas Huxley believe the same thing. Thomas Huxley, who was more responsible for propagating the theory of evolution, even more than Richard Dawkins, believed that blacks were absolutely the genetic inferiors. They were the missing link between whites and apes. But if you believe that, you abrogate the central religious message that we are all equally created in the image of God. There is no other rational explanation for human equality. The blatant inequality of man is what is most available to the senses. Some people are smarter, some are richer, some are more athletic. I, for example, am a yoga master. I don't know why they had to bring some other beautiful, muscular woman when I could have done the same. I know that some of the Canadian men here have six-packs. We Americans have a mono-pack. That's a six-pack surrounded by a cooler. The central message of religion is that what you become is all in your hands, period. It is the exact opposite of the message of evolution, which is you are an animal who cannot control his destiny. There was a book called The Moral Animal written by Robert Wright. He advocated that we finally get rid of adultery as a sin. He's right. If you're an evolutionist, how could you believe that being unfaithful, there's anything wrong with it? When it's in your genes, you can't control it. The central message of religion is what we do is what we become. And it's the one unifying message of all religion. And it is the centerpiece of Western civilization because every single one of you believes it. You raise your kids with that message. Whether you're an atheist or whether you're the most religious fanatic on earth, you raise your kids to understand that how they behave and what they do will ultimately determine what they become. We are not just thinking primates. We are not just conditioned and controlled by our instincts. We are capable of being generous when it's against our nature. We are capable of curbing our temper when we are in a fury. We are capable of inspiring our children and swimming against the soulless message of modern materialistic society, a godless, soulless society that says that nothing but money is the currency by which we purchase our self-esteem. We can swim against the message that says that only profit maketh a man. But what profit is it to a man to feel that without profit, he is not a man? Each of us have incalculable, inestimable divine value. That is a message that I want to live by. My Islamic brothers and sisters are just that, my brothers and sisters. So are my Christian brothers and sisters. So are my atheistic brothers and sisters. So are whites, blacks, green, whatever color, because we all trace our origin to one Heavenly Father. Let me just say before I go, because my time is now up, that I love Canada. The Canadians are extremely warm-hearted, open-minded, very authentic people. There's much Canada can learn from the United States, and there's much that we Americans can learn from you Canadians. I always get stopped by people who watch Alone in the Home, a show I host on TLC, which is a great honor. I even eventually want to do a Canadian version because I'm so impressed at the families, which are healthy here in this country. I hope and trust that we will not allow any of our prejudices to govern our choices, but rather our choices will obliterate our prejudices. God bless you. Thank you.
Shmuley.
Thank you very much.
That's
that's the book, the debate.
You're gonna